During the 2016 election, misinformation and its potential threat to governments and industry around the world came to the forefront. But this is not a new issue for Pat Condo, the chief executive officer of Seekr, an internet technology company that helps consumers through their Seekr score to rate content and empower consumers of information. Pat, thank you very much for joining me for the Swift Hour.
Yep, my pleasure.
It's great to be with you. So, on the front page, almost every single day, there's comments and headlines talking about misinformation and disinformation, but you don't always read a lot about solutions.
Right.
How do you navigate what seems like such a complex, challenging, global issue that affects everything in our lives at the kind of macro scale that makes a difference?
Yeah, so we're pioneers in artificial intelligence, and what we did was took a look at news coming in and all sorts of content and began to build models around what that looks like. So what is a fair and balanced document? What contains credible information? What contains principles of journalism? What contains bias? And then we looked at the variant ways that people publish information: editorials, obituaries, op-eds, parodies, comedies, tragedies, and we modeled these out and began to build a view of when we see an article and we see the presence of some features, we can say this is trending towards something that's not credible or something that is credible, and then we put a score on it. Not unlike you might get a credit score. And in some cases, missing a mortgage, let's say, results in a very low score. Missing a retail card, maybe not. It's the same with articles. Some of them may be clickbait. Some of them may have personal attacks. Some may even have unknown sources cited. But then you start to build the bias in, and pretty soon you get the view of, is this something I can rely on or not? So we want people to be informed, not influenced.
So you're not declaring that your solution is the purveyor of combating, of defining misinformation. Just take a minute, and I know this sounds like a very simple question, but define misinformation and define disinformation.
Yeah. So misinformation is where people are putting out something they know is probably incorrect. It's in their opinion, it's not something that is material. It's not meant to change the course of your life or an election or anything like that. But it might be something that makes you click it. It might be something that puts it to the top of the list because it appeals to you. Disinformation is actually very different. It is put out to move opinion, to move public policy, and to change the way you think about things with a constant view of creating chaos, confusion, ultimately violence, and ultimately, in every democracy, you cast a vote. That is all about changing your vote. And disinformation is far more harmful than misinformation.
So, but why not launch a business that is able to immediately identify misinformation, disinformation, and call it what it is? Why go for the model of the score?
Well, because there's a whole host of reasons for that. First of all, there's people are aligned by certain ideologies. And even if you were to identify things as misinformation, that doesn't necessarily mean somebody's going to believe it. So, or we don't want to be in the business of saying this is true or this is false. What we want to be in the business of is critical thinking. We want to be in the business of transparency. We want people to be able to see content and be able to understand that there are multiple views of that content available, because ultimately the only way we're going to bring people back together again is to come to a more common view of something. And before Seekr were built, the divisions were growing at an alarming rate.
What do you say to people who say, well, the tech companies need to take responsibility for this. They need to fix this problem. How much of this is what the companies are doing, and broadly what industry is doing, versus what everyday people are doing and what consumers are doing and what consumers want to click on, right? Yeah. How much of this is even possible to fully address? I mean, you're bringing a solution to the table, but broad strokes, how much of this is consumers need to be better informed versus how much these companies in general need to do better?
Okay, so I would take it up a notch, which is there 2/3 of the world are not democracies. And the 1/3 that is continuously pummeled across its social media, its broadcast, and media companies in general with false and misleading information coming in from all sorts of nation states. Then you have the impact of domestic activists. And the sum of those two things creates a pool inside where people begin to doubt the very footing that they are on. And when you layer into it synthetic content that will be created by the chat GPTs of the world, you've now got a possibility where the truth or any way to get to truth is extraordinarily difficult to divine. And we have seen in popular culture that sometimes the most popular answer is the answer everybody wants, but then that isn't necessarily the most credible. So I see that, yes, some people are divided by their views, but the people that aren't are young people because they haven't formed a view. So what I see as the most important mission of the times is to get young people to be media literate, critical thinking, the ability to see multiple sides, and start with them. We're not necessarily going to influence the cable TV crowd. They are already where they are over 50, 60 years of their life. But young people start out without those biases. They start out without those positions. And it's only later in life that they adopt them. And we want to get them early. We want to show them that there's multiple views and that some of these things are just deceptive practices. And I feel that's one of the most important things that any nation can do is to sort out what's deceptive for their young people.
What's the most challenging element of running Seekr today?
Well, I think it's changing. So in the beginning, people doubted that AI could be identify and be as good as any journalist could be. The average journalist takes almost 45 minutes to identify biases. We take milliseconds. So we overcame that one objection, which is how could the computer actually do this? The second objection that we've overcome is that this AI can be used anywhere. We can decouple it from the way we use it today, and we can actually put it in the middle of media advertising agencies because they too have a problem. They call it content alignment. How do I align my brand with that content if I don't know or don't understand what that content is saying? In the last 4 years, the narratives have shifted so dramatically versus any other point in time that brands are frozen. Podcasts, as an example, are a $23 billion business. They have less than 10% of them are advertised on because people are afraid of personal attacks. So we built what's called a civility score. So every time a podcast runs, we examine it and we come back and we say, the use of this language could be termed abusive or it's friendly. They knew each other. So maybe they use profanity, but it's still a friendly conversation. You and I don't know each other and I use profanity, it can be abusive. So
What's happened in the last 12 months when I think back to last September summit? I don't remember asking anyone about AI. And now it's one of the major themes. Everyone's talking about it. It's on the front pages everywhere. What has happened in the last year that has put artificial intelligence at the forefront of just about every dialogue?
Well, two things. Number one, Silicon Valley is probably the best marketing machine in the world. And so you have that because AI has been around for 30 years. Number two, the real breakthrough is that prior to January, when ChatGPT was released, in order to interface with a computer, you needed to be a programmer. You needed to have technical skills. Now anyone can interface with a computer. Anyone can get it to do what it wants, and they are delighted and surprised, and to some degree sometimes shocked at what it will do based upon what you're asking it to do. So there's this huge experimentation kind of taking place where it's the province of creating a business now, or the promise has gone from, gee, you need a company with developers, to an individual create a company using the power of AI.
Got it. So huge, and but
Massive
really,
leap forward,
massive leap
because the average person, an 8-year-old, can interface with a computer and get it to do something, and get it to do something at scale.
How confident are you in this broader situation of misinformation and disinformation improving in advance of the 2024 election in the United States?
I'm not confident at all. In fact, I'm very worried about it because I feel like we've unleashed this capability, and it's already, even up to, I think 6 weeks ago, Facebook announced that it had uncovered one of the largest influence operations it had ever seen in their network, and it involved millions and millions of people. This is even pre-synthetic content being created. So imagine if your network is penetrated by millions of people who are on there every day trying to put disruptive information, and now you implement large language models against it. What kind of havoc is that going to create? The narrative is so important, and how that narrative is carried across these networks, because people intercept the narrative all along the way. And if they're intercepting it and they're seeing, things that are false and misleading or coordinated, inauthentic behavior, and they don't know it, we all cast a vote. That vote's going to be based on that imperfect information. I'm scared that it's going to be worse than it's ever been.
So building on that a bit, because obviously the media is at the center of this. You recently wrote an op-ed in Forbes magazine, specifically talking about the relationship between money, journalism, and the spread of misinformation. What do you mean? What are you implying there? What are you trying to say?
I'm saying that the business models that exist today do not reward quality journalism. That if you're not sensational, if you're not scandalous, if you don't get your story to the top of the list, meaning top of Google search results or the top of the most talked about in X or any of these other places, you have probably failed within your organization, and you may not have a job at some point, because the lifeblood of these media companies is the small percentages of advertising that they can generate from Meta or from Google. And they control the entire flow. And if you don't satisfy those rules, you have no way to make income, because no one's paying a subscription, and you can't advertise on your own because you've given your distribution up to those two companies.
Last question. You've launched Mission Seekr. You're working with different influencers on a wide array of subjects. One of those subjects that you're focused on is the environment, and working very closely with Bear Grylls. Talk a little bit about Mission Seekr.
One of the biggest areas of, I believe, false and misleading information is under the broad title of climate environment. And it's infused with politics everywhere you go. Yet there are aspects of it, conservation, preservation, outdoor life, all these things that are so important to everybody. And what we wanted to do was find a person that represented the purity of being outdoors, being non-political, enjoying the planet, enjoying the environment. And we found Bear Grylls. And he loved it because he starts out teaching you physical survival skills, and now he calls it digital survival skills. And he believes that one of the legacies he wants to leave is that everybody knows what's happening in the planet. So how does that happen without a popular figure and away from government influence? So we created Mission Seekr, and there's a mission in every country where ambassadors execute these missions, and young people will go out and try to find plastic in the ocean, or oil in the cornfield, or some other kind of disruption that's occurring, and they'll immediately take a picture of it, or they'll write about it, and they'll submit it up, and we'll start to collect more and more. And ultimately, we want to have the largest collection of user-generated content that actually is about truly what's happening in the environment. So when somebody says the rainforests are being deforested, let's go see. When somebody says the ice caps are melting, let's go see. When somebody says that there's ice in the Sahara Desert, let's go see. And when the kids do it, it's far more innocent, it's without political, and now people can start to learn more about it at the age that we want them. And the second part of it is that we've executed this with another principle in mind, which is that it's about the people in those countries. So if we're in Africa, we have Africans. If we're in South America, we have South Americans. If we're in Asia, we have, so everywhere we go, we use the people to be ambassadors to the program. So they are actually committed to their own country and be responsible for their part of the planet through that mechanism. And then we speak about it at a high level. We bring on more celebrities. They get around it. None of it's political. And ultimately, we want everyone to go there. If I want to know what's going on with the planet, I'm going to go there.
Well, Pat Condo, thank you very, very much for joining us.
My pleasure.
And everybody should check out Seekr.com and the Seekr score.
Thank you.
Thank you.